Coming up on Bridge City News, officials from the city of Lethbridge have an update as to how the novel coronavirus is impacting our city. The president of the Alberta Federation of Labour speaks out about why the province should be shutting down even more businesses during the pandemic. And we hear about how people are turning to alternative medicine as scientists are scrambling to come up with a vaccine in the fight against COVID-19.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. In an effort to combat the spread of COVID-19, a proposal has been brought forth to allow people only one trip to the grocery store per week. The suggestion came from Western Canada's largest private sector union. The president of the United Food and Commercial Workers 401, Tom Hess, says government should also bring in regulations that allow only one person per family in a store at a time. In a recent interview, Hess says grocery stores cannot be a free-for-all and that clear rules need to be put in place that are enforceable with fines. The union suggests loyalty programs and membership cards could be used to track visits, and peace officers may be needed to enforce regulations. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture is warning that the domestic food supply has to be on the top of the list of issues for Ottawa in the fight against COVID-19. Keith Curry, the Vice President of the Canadian Federation of Agriculture, says he's hoping that the government is investing not only money, but in the tools farmers need to maintain food production moving forward.
We are in a situation where we do need help. So if the public can contact their MP and lend their support to the food production system, all the provinces across this country have deemed us essential, as has the federal government, who's deemed our workers essential. But we really need a priority on food production. Even myself, I'm making decisions on if I'm going to continue at full production or cut back. And we're all doing the same thing. And what that means is there'll be less production coming out this harvest season, if we can even have enough workers to get the harvest off. And the last thing we want to do is put something in the ground and not be able to take it off and have it waste in the field. So we're certainly very concerned about the planting season, but also in our livestock and in our protein sector, there are growing animals that can't wait for processing, and if that capacity is slowed down, then there's going to be less product available that way too.
Curry says agriculture is a $112 billion business and employs around 2.5 million people. He says support for the ag industry is important now more than ever. The president of the Alberta Federation of Labour says the time has come for the province to reevaluate its list of essential workplaces. This comes after workers have tested positive for COVID-19 at a meat packing plant near Calgary and at an oil sands worksite near Fort McMurray. Gil McGowan fired off a letter to Provincial Labour Minister Jason Copping, encouraging the government to temporarily close work sites to help stop the spread of the coronavirus. McGowan said, "We are asking that your government stop letting companies essentially regulate themselves when it comes to compliance with public health directives issued by the Chief Medical Officer of Health. Specifically, we think the government needs to beef up its inspection and enforcement efforts with escalating fines and worksite closures for non-compliance." McGowan says his group is not convinced enough is being done to keep workers and the public safe in all sectors, in all workplaces, and at all times. The province's surveillance information system is back online, and with that, the Alberta Chief Medical Officer of Health says there were 239 new cases of COVID-19 in Alberta. Dr. Dina Henshaw says the reason why the numbers are higher is because the government expanded how many people were being tested this week.
In the last 24 hours, we did 3,831 COVID tests. Another reason for the recent increase in case numbers can be attributed in part to a surge in cases identified in households linked to a meat packing facility in High River. There are now 358 cases linked to this outbreak, involving multiple connected households. Some of these households are in surrounding communities, such as Calgary, and current information suggests that the cases in this outbreak are primarily linked to household transmission.
Dr. Henshaw also says there has been an outbreak of the coronavirus in the maternity ward at the Foothills Hospital in Calgary. She says the province will have more on that next week. There are 2,397 confirmed cases in Alberta, along with 50 deaths from COVID-19. Here in the south, we now have 68 confirmed cases. In total, 1,124 people across the province have recovered from the novel coronavirus. The province announced today that camping reservations have been temporarily suspended due to the coronavirus. Alberta Parks is suspending and refunding camping reservations up to and including May 19th. The suspension is in place until our province's Chief Medical Officer of Health feels confident the health and public safety risk from COVID-19 is reduced. Alberta joins BC, Saskatchewan, and Ontario, which have also suspended or delayed camping reservations. According to Lethbridge Police Service, they have yet to hand out any fines for people who have not been following the provincial guidelines for social distancing. They've also received instructions from the Public Health Agency of Canada. Ainsley O'Reilly has the details.
If you are someone who isn't following the province's social distancing requirements, you could be fined $1,200. No one in Lethbridge has been fined, but warnings have been put in place.
We have issued a number of warnings, one to a local business at the referral of AHS.
To the surprise of the Lethbridge Police Service, they haven't received a high volume of calls stemming from neighbors and residents reporting each other.
Our community is taking care of each other. They're all, understanding the situation that we're all in together.
LPS has also been instructed by the Public Health Agency of Canada to maintain compliance checks for those who have returned to Lethbridge from abroad.
So we have received 3 of those requests to date, and we're just obviously looking into those right now. We just received those yesterday, so we are looking into those to ensure those individuals are staying home and complying with those requirements.
If you are one of those people returning to Canada from another country, you are required by federal law to quarantine yourself for 14 days. For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
In the name of social distancing, the Lethbridge Fire and Paramedic team has decided not to go visit kids on their birthdays like other stations have been doing. Instead, parents can visit lethbridge.ca/birthdaywish, and there they will find a special birthday video attached.
One of our captains, Paul Wazowicz, he does a pretty good Gru impersonation. So we've got him and some of his co-workers that made a video, and it's quite entertaining. Hopefully the kids get a kick out of it. I'm sure the parents will, if nothing else. And I really appreciate them stepping up and doing that. So,
after introducing the new ride-by-appointment transit system, Lethbridge Transit officials have noticed that some customers are not following the proper protocols set in place by the city. Transit manager Scott Grayco explains.
We are seeing people using the service over and over throughout the day, and not necessarily for essential travel purposes. So we are urging our customers to use the service for essential travel only. When the buses are picking you up, we urge customers to wait at their bus stop for 20 minutes. So again, it's not door-to-door service, but we are asking patrons to wait at the bus stop for 20 minutes. And if you see a bus, it might not be your bus.
Now, the booking line phone number is 403-359-6558, or if you want more information, you can also visit the city's website, lethbridgetransit.ca. Since vehicle interiors are essentially small contained spaces, it's more important than ever to take steps to reduce the risk of contracting the coronavirus while driving or riding inside. The experts at Jet's Car Wash in Lethbridge recommend these tips to increase your safety during the coronavirus pandemic.
One of the best things people can do is treat their cars like their hands. You know what? Soap and hot water. On our bays, of course, come in there, use the wands, clean off your car a little bit, soap it down, and then rinse it off. The water that we use in our car wash is over 100 degrees at the nozzle there, so it's actually going to help kill some of the virus, deteriorate it, and make sure that you can clean it off. Pull out your mats out of your vehicle because you are going to be tracking stuff with your feet in that. Pull them out, soap and hot water. Again, using the brushes to apply the soap, give it a good scrub, and then the hot water rinse is going to help prevent any sort of virus transmission. When they're inside and they've actually wiped their car down, is to have some disinfectant wipes in their vehicle to wipe down their steering wheels, the dash, their seats, cup holders. That's one of those things while you're in the bays and you've kind of cleaned off your vehicle, give your vehicle a quick wipe down on the inside. So again, a handful of disinfectant wipes, keeping them with you inside the vehicle as well.
Nail, hair, and skincare shops across Lethbridge shut their doors as part of the order to close non-essential businesses. Now, people who regularly go to the salons and spas for services are asking stylists and estheticians for tips on how to maintain their looks. We spoke with a local esthetician about how people can self-maintain.
Obviously, we're not able to open here and do our services because it would be too close to people. But But what we can do is help people stock up on their beauty products and things that they need at home to help them look good and feel good throughout the day.
The best way to do it at home would just be to get a really gritty file and basically just file off any lifting that you have if you want to keep them on for a little bit longer, or if they've grown out past that point that you just need them off. Just file them very, very carefully. You don't want to be filing your natural nail. You want to be careful it's not getting too warm. Yeah, just being really careful, and then your nails are going to be a little bit dry after, so you're going to want to apply like a really nice nail strengthener and a nice cuticle oil, and that should help.
Our country's heritage minister says Ottawa will be providing $500 million to support the arts, culture and sports sectors. Stephen Gibault also says the federal government is planning virtual Canada Day celebrations this year in place of the traditional gathering in Ottawa.
This targeted measure will provide financial support that is consistent with the government's existing COVID-19 support measures for wage and fixed costs for organization. It will be administered by Canadian Heritage with the support of many of our partners, such as the Canada Council for the Arts. Our government has also decided to celebrate Canada Day differently this year. Canada Day will be hosted virtually. As we let them into our personal lives, we are reminded each day how fortunate we are to have such talent here in Canada.
The federal government's fight against COVID-19 and to help Canadians through the pandemic crisis is flawed. Now, that's according to Conservative leader Andrew Scheer. Scheer says regular questioning by opposition MPs is necessary, even in a reduced capacity, to protect all of those involved.
The need to have a second set of eyes go through their legislation has already been proven. Again, we're not talking about a hypothetical situation. We're talking about concrete evidence as to how the opposition parties have improved upon government legislation and gotten better results for Canadians. So in times of crisis, we need our government to be operating at peak efficiency. We need them to be firing on all cylinders and getting things right the first time.
The government of Manitoba is banning non-essential travel to northern and remote communities. There's also an order that anyone entering the province from another province must self-isolate for 14 days. Health officials say less travel means reduced spread of COVID-19. The orders will be enforced until May 1st.
Residents of the north and remote communities may continue to move within the north. The delivery of goods and services can continue. The order does not apply to government employees or healthcare providers traveling for work, families with shared parenting agreements, or child and family service workers. This will help protect the region where the spread of the virus could significantly affect the health of that population. In addition, we are now requiring anyone returning to Manitoba from a different province to self-isolate for 14 days. This will help reduce the reintroduction of the virus in Manitoba.
Meanwhile, in Ontario, Premier Doug Ford says his province is expanding its hospital capacity in a bid to anticipate any scenario during the COVID-19 pandemic. Ford says Ontario added just over 1,000 acute care beds and close to 1,500 critical care beds in case there's a sudden surge of patients.
I said we would do absolutely everything in our power to fight this virus. And after weeks of preparation and hard work by hospital staff and our frontline heroes, we've added over 2,000 acute care and critical care beds to our hospital system since the start of this outbreak. And we're on track to add another 4,200 acute care beds by the end of April. It's because of these efforts that we're able to redeploy resources to our long-term care homes and other priority areas. And last week, I promised by today we'd be testing 8,000 people a day. Well, today we're at over 9,000 COVID-19 tests.
There were 564 new COVID-19 cases in Ontario today. With no approved medication for the novel coronavirus, some people are turning to alternative medicines, often at their government's urging.
There are scientific ways to determine whether something works for an illness. And without that, you could also look at whether the theory behind it makes sense. If it hasn't been proven and it doesn't make sense, stop there. This is something I think that scientists will solve. In the meantime, will anything else be useful? I wouldn't spend any money on it. The useful thing at the moment seems to be stay away from people who have it, and that's what most of the world is doing.
There is a very large event coming up this November called One God, One Day, One Africa. It is an evangelistic outreach involving close to 50 countries in Africa. Jennifer Wild is involved in the event, and she says it all began for her when she received a vision from God in 1980.
He gave me a vision, and it was a vision of multi-millions of people, as far as the eye could see, receiving Jesus as their Lord and Savior all at one time. And you know, back then there was no internet, no phone, no nothing. It was impossible to do something like that. But I just believed him. I would just believed everything, and I said, okay, you know, I started praying about it.
Catch the full interview with Jennifer discussing what it takes to coordinate One God, One Day, One Africa coming up in the second half of our show. It was so nice to hit double-digit temperatures again today, but things will be cooling off substantially tomorrow, but only for a short time. Full weather details are on deck. Looks like kind of a mixed bag this weekend, a potential of snow, but then warming up considerably on Sunday. Jeanette, it looks like once we hit Sunday, it'll be smooth sailing for warm temperatures.
Yeah, that's the hope anyway, Hal. We just have to get through tonight and Saturday. And speaking of tonight, we're going to be seeing some cloudy skies there with some periods of rain beginning early this evening. And overnight, we could see that rain mixed with a bit of snow, up to 5 millimeters of rain. In fact, we could see, and wind gusts up to 50 km. The overnight low tonight at 2 degrees. And into Saturday, we're going to be seeing periods of snow ending around noon, and then cloudy skies for the rest of the day. High of 4 degrees on Saturday, and overnight low on Saturday evening of -5. And then we've got some sunny days ahead of us as we get into those more spring-like temperatures for Sunday. Lots of sunshine, 14 degrees sunshine as well on Monday with a high of 18. We could see us reaching all the way up to 19 degrees on Tuesday. Lots of sunshine in the sky and some scattered clouds on Wednesday with a high of 18. 13 is our expected high for next Thursday with increasing clouds there. Not too shabby. We are definitely into those averages for this time of year of the highs of 13 degrees. Lows -1. We're kind of hitting that overnight. The high temperature on this day back in 1980 was 25 degrees, and the record low on this day was -12. That was in 1953. The sun rose this morning at 6:34 a.m. and it set at 8:27 p.m., giving us almost 14 hours of daylight. That's pretty good compared to what we were looking at a couple months ago when we barely got 8 hours. So looking ahead to Saturday's highs on the West Coast, Victoria's high 17, Vancouver 16 degrees, periods of rain in Victoria, lots of clouds in Vancouver. We're going to see a chance of snowfall tomorrow in Edmonton and Calgary, and then looking over to Saskatoon and Regina. Regina could see some snowfall as well, high of 4 degrees. 3 degrees is the expected high in Saskatoon. A high of 5 degrees in Winnipeg. They could see some scattered clouds and possibly some scattered showers as well. Looking over to Toronto, a mix of sun and cloud there with a high of 10 degrees, high of 11 expected in Ottawa, and 9 degrees in Montreal with lots of sunshine in both Montreal and Ottawa for Saturday. Looking into the Maritimes as we move further east, Fredericton's high 8 degrees, lots of sunshine. Sunshine also expected in Charlottetown with a high of 5. Halifax could see a mix of snow and rain with a high of 5 degrees, and St. John's, Newfoundland, same thing. They're going to be seeing a mix of snow and rain with a high of 4 degrees. There you go, Hal. That is your forecast.
Conservative leader Andrew Scheer said the Liberals allowed climate change to get in the way of supporting our country's oil and gas sector.
There are clearly people in the Liberal cabinet, there are cabinet ministers who have made a career of attacking the energy sector, that have demonized the high-quality products that flow from the energy sector, that attack the Canadian oil and gas sector that is a source of ethical energy, much more preferable to oil and gas coming from corrupt regimes that abuse human rights. They are at the table, at the Liberal cabinet table. So we are very concerned that those voices would influence the government's decision, and that they would not provide assistance, or they would provide assistance in such a way that it would be very difficult for out-of-work Albertans, Saskatchewanians, and British Columbians from being able to maintain their jobs.
Now, in response, the federal Liberals announced a $1.7 billion plan to clean up abandoned energy facilities and $750 million to reduce methane emissions. Environmental groups say Ottawa's oil patch bailout helps people and not polluters. Marin Smith of Clean Energy Canada says it shows the Liberals remain committed to their environmental program. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney thanked the federal government for, as he says, taking this very important first step to support the folks who work in our energy sector. Federal Finance Minister Bill Morneau says Ottawa is expanding a loan program for small and medium-sized businesses suffering from the economic shutdown sparked by COVID-19. It also says he's working on a program to help commercial landlords who provide rent reductions for small businesses for 3 months.
In recognition of the challenges that are facing Canadian businesses and commercial property owners, we're announcing our intention to introduce the Canadian Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance Program for small businesses. The program will seek to provide loans, including forgivable loans, to commercial property owners who provide small businesses with rent reductions for April, May, and June. To do this, we're going to need to work in partnership with provincial and territorial governments who govern the commercial property owner-tenant relationships. We'll continue to work with provinces and territories on this proposal to ensure that we can enhance support for hard-hit small businesses, and we will have more to say on this in the very near future.
More than 1 million Canadians say that they're on the verge of bankruptcy due to COVID-19. A recent poll by DART says that 4.2 million Canadians have said that they might be heading towards bankruptcy over the next few months unless their financial situations improve. Trevor Lewington with Economic Development Lethbridge says the businesses should only declare bankruptcy as a last resort.
There's lots of financial advice out there. There's lots of alternatives. And before, if people are really thinking that bankruptcy is the only answer, they should absolutely talk to a qualified professional about that. But I think they really need to look at different options. Just talk to your creditors, talk to your credit card companies, talk to your landlords. Most people recognize this is an unprecedented global event. And I think, you'll find people are willing to be pretty flexible and work out an arrangement. So just encourage people to try having those powerful conversations before they jump straight to bankruptcy as their only option.
The survey found that younger Canadians who come from middle-income families and small businesses are the most vulnerable to bankruptcy. The federal emergency wage subsidy is allowing Transit AT to rehire 4,000 employees it had temporarily laid off due to COVID-19. The tour operator laid off 80% of its employees last month after halting all flights because of the coronavirus. Transat says the employees will not be required to work as part of their recall. They will receive 75% of their baseline pay, up to a maximum of $847 per week, as defined in federal legislation passed last week. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 460 points to finish the day at 14,359. The Dow was up 704 points to 24,242. The S&P 500 was up 75 points to 2874, and the Nasdaq was up 117 points to 8650. Oil was down $1.75 to $18.12 per barrel today. Natural gas was up 8 cents to $1.76. Gold was down $34.88 to finish the day at $16.82.82 an ounce, and silver was down 32 cents an ounce to $15.18. Wheat is at $245 per metric ton, barley's at $239, canola's at $458, and corn is at $243 per metric ton. Live cattle were down 18 cents to $86.30, feeder cattle were up 80 cents to $119.28, lean hogs were up 55 cents to $43.73, and the Canadian dollar was up slightly on the day to 71.43 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, the federal Liberals announced a $1.7 billion plan to clean up abandoned oil wells and $750 million to reduce methane emissions. Environmental groups say Ottawa's oil patch bailout helps people and not polluters. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney thanked the federal government for, as he says, taking this important first step to support the folks who work in our energy sector. A huge evangelistic event is taking place in Africa this November called One God, One Day, One Africa. It'll connect close to 50 African nations and one of the biggest outreaches that continent has ever seen. One of the main organizers of the event, Jennifer Wild, joins me next with all of the details. As Christians, most of us are familiar with evangelistic outreaches, but could you imagine a 4-day Christian event taking place simultaneously across the entire African continent? The numbers would be staggering. To chit-chat a bit about it is Jennifer Wild. She's president of the group One God, One Day, One Africa. Jen joins us from Florida. Welcome to BCN.
Thank you so much, Hal, for having me. It's a blessing and an honor to be here.
Well, that's awesome. Good to have you here. So tell me a bit about this event. What is it all about?
Well, it's actually the largest Christian outreach in history. Nothing like this has ever been done, ever attempted. You know, people have covered countries a lot of times here and there, but nobody has ever actually done an entire continent of anywhere yet. So this is the entire continent of Africa, and we are partnering with many uh, churches, ministries, evangelists, pastors all over the world. Actually, they adopt a country, one country. There's 54 countries in Africa. We'll be in as many live as possible with miracle festivals. So these will be outreaches where a church adopts, say, Kenya. And that church, the pastor or the evangelist or the head of the missionary agency will go over there, preach the gospel, hold a miracle festival for 3 to 5 days. I know you said 4 days, so it's 3 to 5 days, whatever they would like. And that will be live streamed TV and radio to that country while they're doing it on those 4 nights, day 4. But on the last night, all across, so we'll be having these live miracle festivals in every country simultaneously on these nights. And on the last one, we will live stream TV, radio from 4 different locations around Africa, north, south, east, west, and about 15 minutes apiece or whatever across the entire continent. Hence, one God, one day, one Africa.
Now, Jennifer, I understand that this event arose from a vision you received all the way back in 1980. Tell me a bit more about that.
I was living in Hollywood. I was an actress and a model. I was completely lost. I didn't know anything about God, had never set foot in church. And one day I was at a big Hollywood party, and my best friend, who was married to the top movie star of the day, who won the Golden Globe Awards that year, he was actually a heroin addict. He came out, he threw a piece of paper at me when I was leaving, and I was always, there was always a hole in my heart. I was always, and I didn't know anything about God or Jesus. I had never set foot in a church, came from a wealthy family, had everything, but I was completely lost. And he said, "Here, Jennifer, maybe this will do you some good." He was Italian. He threw it at me, a tract. I'll never forget it. It was David Wilkerson, and it said, "The two of me, the struggle with sin." And, you know, I said, "Very funny, Ray." I went home. I put it in my pocket the next day after being hungover and doing drugs and the whole thing. Back then, everybody was. It was horrible, a horrible time. But, you know, I pulled it out, and it said the struggle with sin. And it was strange how, because I knew I had sin a lot, but I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. So I opened it and I started reading that, and it talked about heaven and hell and God and Jesus, and that you would live forever for eternity. And you know, it said that it's your choice where you're going to go, heaven or hell, and you pick. And it said, all you have to do is believe and receive Jesus as your Lord and Savior and be sorry for your sins. That's it. That's all you have to do. And you will be in heaven for eternity. And it was like, wow, that's all I have to do. And I thought, you know what? What if this is true? What if all these millions of Christians around the world are right, and there is a heaven and hell, we do live forever? Well, it scared me to death. I knew I was on my way to hell, and I did not want to go there. No way, no how. And so it said, say this little prayer at the end: receive Jesus, accept him into your heart, be sorry for your sins. I said, okay, I'm sorry for the bad things I've done. And I received him, and he completely changed my life.
So Jennifer, as you began to share your vision with leaders all the way around the world, what are some of the responses you received to it?
Well, I really didn't share with a lot of people. God kind of took this whole thing. Back then, when I became a Christian, how this came about, he gave me a vision. And it was a vision of multi millions of people, as far as the eye could see, receiving Jesus as their Lord and Savior all at one time. And you know, back then there was no internet, no phone, no nothing. It was impossible to do something like that. But just believed him. I would just believed everything, and I said, okay, you know, I started praying about it. And when I started making these calls, I had been a missionary in Mexico for 10 years, living out in the dirt and the trash with my kids. I didn't know anyone. I didn't do the circuit. I didn't go to, I didn't know anything or anyone. And when God said a few years ago, now is the time to do this, I just through circumstances, a series, he led me to Siegfried Tomaszewski, who was actually Reinhard Bonnke's CEO in Africa and Europe for many years. I believe that nobody else in the world could do this except Siegfried. And when I talked to him about it, you asked what was the response. I got his name and number. Someone told me about him. They said, call him. I did, and he hung up on me. And I called him back and I said, we lost the connection. And he said, no, we didn't. I hung up on you. And I said, what? Why? And he said, because it's crazy. I've never heard of anything like this. It's overwhelming. It's too big. And I said, well, you know what? God is that big. God can do anything. Don't you believe that? And he goes, okay, I'll pray about it. And the rest is history. He prayed about it.
Originally supposed to take place in May, but now with the global COVID-19 pandemic, it has been rescheduled to November 12th through the 15th. Where exactly is it going to be taking place, and how many countries and people are participating? It's huge.
Oh my goodness. As of now, we have almost every country that we can get in covered. So ministries almost, I think there's, I don't know, I don't keep up on the exact numbers. I think it's 48 out of the 54 countries we can get in. Places like Syria, we can't. You know, North Africa, it's hard in some places. But ministries have adopted a country, so they're covered. They're raising the money, these ministries, to go over and preach the gospel at that time. We are the organizers. We're putting everything together. So we give them a boots on the ground person over there if they need it. A lot of these ministries have been working over in Africa for years. They don't need our help in that way, but some do. And then we put them together with a person who knows the government officials, all the churches and pastors, all the deacon, you know, all the people, the media, everyone that they need to know to get this done in that country.
How do you actually go about setting up an event this large? I mean, there's a lot of things you have to consider, such as security, bathrooms, water, a solid sound system at each venue.
Absolutely. And these are done individually. They're all done at the in the countries by whoever is doing the organizing for that ministry, or if the ministry itself is organizing it with just pastors and locals and the government officials and this kind of thing. They do that. So yes, everyone has a crusade director, and those crusade directors do everything that they need to do, from all that you just said, security to everything. They're huge. It's a huge ordeal just to have one of these done in one country.
So Jennifer, what's your main goal now with One God, One Day, One Africa?
Our main goal is to see the entire continent of Africa saved, healed, delivered, set free, filled with the Holy Spirit, and following Jesus, knowing him, and surrendered and sacrificing their lives to Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior. From the tiniest villages to the biggest cities, everyone, everywhere.
And you believe that God is endorsing this event, that his hand is really upon this. Do you have any testimonies or stories you'd like to share along those lines?
Oh boy, there's so many, Hal, that he's done.
Just give me one.
One. Well, the main one I just told you is about getting Siegfried, the only person in the world, on board with this. But then since then, people like Heidi Baker, Reinhard Bonnke, his successor, Daniel Kalinda, who is the head of Christ for All Nations, people like that, Youth with a Mission. We have the top Wycliffe Bible translators. Everybody is on board with this. Saddleback Church, I mean, you name it, everybody's on board. Every denomination, Christian denomination, including Catholics, Baptists, non-denominational. It's about unity, and I think that's why God is endorsing this, because he's bringing everybody together, which we should have been together the whole time, but everybody's been kind of doing their own thing since the Lord
Are there going to
came.
be crusades happening in each nation in the days leading up to the event?
The event are the days. So the crusade are the events, the 3 to 5 days. And then the last day, like we said, is where it will be live streamed on that one day from 4 different areas. But the events are the live 3 to 5 days in every country on the same weekend, in the second weekend of November, like you said.
How can viewers get involved with One God, One Day, One Africa? Jennifer?
Well, they can go to our website. That's the main thing, and that's www.1gdagodDayAfrica.org and sign up. And we have a couple of spots left to adopt a country for larger churches or whoever would like to do that, evangelists, missionaries, whatever. But there's so many ways to get involved. Prayer is so important, Hal. We beg people, please, it's the most number one important thing that you can do is pray for this. And that's how we partner with God. And of course, we always need more funds. Everybody does, but and then people can come. We invite every single person to get involved. If they would like to come to one of the countries and be involved, boots on the ground during the event, they can be in a prayer team. There's all different ways to get involved. Many different ways to be there in November with us.
So Jennifer, after the event wraps up, it doesn't end there. Let's talk about the plan to plant some churches and disciple new believers.
Absolutely. That is so important. And we are partnering with people like Saddleback Church, who has, I think they have 10 to 20 countries in Africa right now where they're doing follow-up. We, of course, have our own follow-up booklets that we will be passing out.
So Jennifer, it's One God, One Day, One Africa. How about potentially in the future doing One God, One Day, One America? So all of the Americas, North, Central America, South America, and then maybe someday down the road doing all of Europe. How about that too?
That is so funny you said that, Hal, because everybody's saying that. People are saying, okay, when this is done, what's next? If the Lord tarries, it's in God's hands. We're available. As long as we have breath, we will be serving the Lord, doing whatever he calls us to do. And that's absolutely, we're talking about it, possibly South America, Central America next, Europe, possibly, like you said, and next, we don't know. But we'll be in ministry until the Lord comes back.
And when you do one in Australia, New Zealand, let me know. I'll join you for that one.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, I'm excited for that too.
Jennifer Weil, president of One God, One Day, One Africa. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, Hal, and God bless you and God bless everyone. Please join us.
Agriculture is still a very big part of the Canadian economy, although the sector is facing challenges in the global market. Farming and ranching are also becoming more and more expensive and high-tech these days. Joining me now to talk about it is Ken Coles. He's the Executive Director of Farming Smarter. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Ken.
Well, thanks for having me, Hal.
Why don't you explain to our viewers, first of all, what is Farming Smarter all about?
You betcha. Farming Smarter is a group that's focused on farmers in southern Alberta. We're a nonprofit organization with a charitable status. And basically, we're trying to change the way people farm. We're doing that through conducting research. We do small plot research, field scale research out on the farm, and we try to adapt innovative ideas. And basically, any way we can do a better job of farming, we want to be able to enable that through science. And not only are we going to share the work that we're doing, but we're going to try to build a stage for all of the other scientists and agriculturalists out there that are working on better practices so that we can get that information out to farmers so that it's being used and it's practical and applied and being impactful.
What are some of the new innovative ideas that are really helping today's farmers here in southern Alberta?
Well, there's so much going on in just about every aspect of agriculture. Just keeping up to date with the new things is a challenge. So there's new innovations in marketing. There's new innovations in what types of crop to grow and how to grow them, how to collect data, how to manage information. Lots of different things going on that will both complicate and help do a better job with their farming businesses.
Are farmers maybe considering different crops as opposed to traditional wheat, barley, maybe even canola because of the China ban, the ban on Canadian canola in China? Are they maybe considering like cannabis or hemp or something
actually,
unique?
All farmers, I think, across the province are always looking for new cropping options. So that's actually one of our main programs within Farming Smarter. We call it the Novel Crops Program. So we'll test out new crops like cannabis or hemp, things like quinoa. We've played around with things like camelina, all types of different crops that are grown in other parts of the world. We want to see how do they work here in southern Alberta. So there's a couple of things. You got to figure out how well does it grow under these conditions, and the other thing is there actually a market for it? So that's one of the challenging things with bringing in new crops is are we going to be competitive with other parts of the world, or is it something that we can have a niche and actually make some money at? So that's definitely a good question. Southern Alberta in particular with irrigation, we have a lot of high value crops and a way more cropping options that are out there. So it really, I think, expands what we can grow, and it's really kind of exciting and interesting too.
So what are the soil conditions like? I know we haven't had a lot of snow so far this winter.
Yeah.
So maybe are we going to have a real dry spring?
Well, I sure hope not, because we've basically come through 3 years of drought now. I actually think soil conditions are a little bit better this year than last year because we have actually had some really good fall moisture. Remember, back in September we had a big dump of snow, and January too. And the good part is that it wasn't frozen. The soil wasn't frozen, so the moisture was actually able to get in. So I don't think we're in fantastic conditions, but definitely better starting off point than last year. And it's really important too what precipitation we get in the growing season. So everybody's hopeful. This is one of those, we need to have a good year because it's been a tough go the last few years.
What are some of the hardier crops the farmers are planting right now?
In the dryland scenario, wheat is still a staple crop. So all the wheats are doing well. The pulses are a shallower rooted crop, so they don't need it quite as much moisture, but they're quite heavily or readily adapted to a dryland scenario. It's just, it can't be zero rain. We need to have something.
Where does your funding come from? Is it private sector and government?
Yeah, so Farming Smarter actually has a broad range of funding sources. We're very much project-based, which means if there's a research project, we have to apply for a grant. So right now, we've got a really good spread between the provincial government, the federal government. We do get some support from producer-grower groups, so there's some checkoffs for growing different crops. Those groups will support WGRF, the Western Grains Research Foundation is another group that helps support our projects. We generate revenue from sponsorship, from our events that we put on, and we also do industry contracts. So we'll do contract research for some of the agrochemical companies, nutrient companies, and you name it. So it's quite a diverse range of funding, and that's really my job to make sure that we are achieving what we're set out to do in our vision and building a stable base of support for what we do.
Ken, the budget came out recently here with the Alberta government. Mm-hmm. They've talked about a lot of cutbacks. Has that impacted your business as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is probably the most significant change to supporting agriculture that I've seen in my career. So we're looking at a significant reduction in support for agriculture, but mainly in really big cuts towards the provincial government itself. So their ability and capacity to do work is going to change quite significantly. If anything, that's going to put pressure on us to grow more, to be able to pick up some of the work that's being done. At this point, we really don't know yet exactly what's happening, but as far as our organization is concerned, especially given the different sources of funding that I just mentioned, we're definitely in good shape. If anything, we're going to grow.
Farming Smarter's had a long-time relationship with Lethbridge College. Mm-hmm. Now, you just signed a 15-year memorandum of understanding.
Yeah.
What is that all about?
Well, I'm actually really excited about that, and it's something that we've been working towards probably for the last 10 years. And Southern Alberta is such a hugely impactful, important piece of the ag economy. In fact, we did some work recently that showed that our area, which is basically south of Highway 1, represents 57% of the gross revenue in agriculture.
Oh.
So there's so much that happens in Southern Alberta. Because of that, there's a lot of opportunity and there's a lot of demand for work and entrepreneurship. So part of the reason we're working with the college is to be able to, you know, work off each other's strengths and be able to serve this demanding industry. Like there's so many cool crops and businesses going on. We can't even come close to be able to service them all on our own. So the partnership allows us to put our resources together, to put our heads together, to build capacity, to be able to take advantage of some of these great opportunities that irrigation allows us to do. And just because agriculture is important, the Lethbridge College also sees that as a really important way of building human resources. So now we can partner on research, but we can partner on education as well. So we have all of these young students coming in. They're about to launch a new degree program in applied technology. Great opportunities for them to come learn about research and all the things that we're doing on our front. And the more we talk, the more we realize that there's opportunities to work together.
So if there are some young people that are considering going into farming, Ken, outside of a lot of startup capital, what advice would you give them?
Well, I think, you know, your brain is your biggest resource. And I think the more knowledge that you can achieve through learning, the better off you're going to be.
So do your research beforehand, right?
Yeah, and also pick an area that you're going to be passionate about. And I think that's you know, there's so many people passionate about agriculture, so I think there's something for everyone in agriculture, and I think there's actually a lot of jobs in agriculture too. So I'd always encourage students to look at programs like that at the college. If I was starting over again, I'd be looking at this new degree coming out of the Lethbridge College.
Now, farming has become a very high-tech business these days. Is there a measurable difference in success rates when you compare farmers staying up to date as opposed to maybe old-school farming techniques?
Kind of $1 million question there, isn't it? I don't think there is a way to measure it. I believe that there's innovators and laggards in every aspect of agriculture. So you can be way advanced in one area and a complete laggard in another, but it might not matter. I personally believe that someone that's dedicated to learning and always challenging the accepted practices is eventually going to be ahead of the game. But agriculture is really, you know, the people that win it are the ones that can manage risk. So I do believe that the strengths in being able to create a farm system that best manages risks is the ones that are going to be successful.
Is there any progress being made on herbicide-resistant weeds here in the prairies?
That's also a tough question. There's progress, but there's also a lot of challenges that are increasing. So herbicide resistance is continually increasing. It's kind of like, you know, that old Jurassic Park movie, Nature Finds a Way. Right. As we continue to do the same things, it adapts, and that's what we're seeing. More and more herbicide resistance is developing. So in that sense, we're losing the game. Is there ways to manage it? Yes, and in some senses, we're coming up with ways to deal with problems quite positively, but it's one of those ones that will continue to be a challenge for farmers moving forward and will require more and more effort and more complex approaches to dealing with it.
Are there certain ways you can test the weeds to see if they are herbicide resistant?
There's certainly ways to test them, both in your field. If you spray your field and certain weeds survive when they shouldn't, that's actually a pretty good test. You can also take samples and send them off to labs for resistance testing. So not sure if that program will continue to exist given the cuts that are going on right now, but I sure hope so. But certainly it is about paying attention to what's going on. If you're seeing strange patterns or patches of weeds, and in the case of glyphosate tolerant kochia, you can actually see strips of weeds that are left behind from the tumbleweeds rolling across the field. So certainly, yes, you can.
So since the Chinese had that Canadian canola ban, The recent stats from Stats Canada says Canada has lost $1 billion worth of business. So the canola farmers that you've talked to, tell me about some of their struggles right now.
Well, this becomes a challenge in revenue. The price of canola has been hampered by those trade restrictions, and then that forces farmers to look at, can I grow less canola? And that's basically the only option you have at this point, unless the folks that are working really hard, and they are, at recovering markets, but also in developing new markets outside of China. So whenever we're dependent on one market, that again adds risk to the farm. So I know there's a lot of effort being put into developing new markets in other countries, and also about expanding internal crushing capacities so that you don't have to depend on expanding it. But that's a question that's really out of my wheelhouse, but it is certainly an impactful one.
So what are some of the other countries we're looking at possibly getting our products to market? Maybe India?
Yeah.
Maybe South Korea? What are some of the other?
I don't know. This is not my area of expertise.
Just open it up, right?
You know, that's where you have these producer commissions that are really good at focusing in on that. So the Alberta Canola Producers Commission, the Canola Council of Canada, they've got experts in that field, and working with the major grain companies, the pioneers and so on. And I can guarantee you that they're putting every effort forward in developing those markets.
It's wonderful that Lethbridge College has a lot of the programs to get people interested in farming, the agriculture sector, and actually putting their resources into that. But there are also a lot of farming families who are getting out of it altogether. They're saying, this isn't profitable anymore. Have you talked to some of those families and the reasons why they're getting out? Is it all just about the money right now, or what is it?
Yeah,
the dedication, and there's a lot of hard work, right?
It's a lot of factors, and I think it's a tough business. And you'll see too that there's been a new movement looking at mental health in the agricultural industry too. I personally think there could be people that are getting out of it because it's just not fun.
And it's burnout,
and
right?
It's burnout, it's stressful, and I have a small farm on my own, and when you have a wreck, you have a really big wreck, and you got to have a pretty tough stomach to deal with the stress and the magnitude of the risks. You lose a bin of canola, all of a sudden that's $100,000 loss, just like that. So, I think those factors play in, but also, can you make a go of it? I mean, financially, you have to be able to, service the debt and deal with the pressures there. But, I do think that the industry will survive, and there are folks that are moving on, but there are folks that are thriving. So
where's the biggest competition? Still from the States?
Probably ourselves. It all depends. At the farm unit, it's you're always your own biggest competition, and it could be everything from land competition from colonies. It could be everything is so very much specific. Did you own the land? Has the land been passed forward for generations? Do you have oil rights on your land? So it's pretty tough to come up with any single thing that's changing the industry. All that margins are tight. Farmers are being asked to do more than they ever did before. So it is more complex on every level, not just technology, but you never used to have to market your crops, right? Back in the day, you just sold it and that was it. Now if you want to be successful, you have to learn to be a really great marketer. You have to look at
smart business person.
Yeah, smart business planning, risk management, you name it.
Wow. How about farmers that are also considering maybe more wind turbines or wind farms on their property?
Well, I think all of those off-farm revenue sources
does that help too?
Absolutely play a factor, because I see, areas that have lots of oil wells or leases on that. There's not as much pressure for them to perform on the agricultural front when you've got revenue generated from other sources. So I think, any off-farm source is going to help manage risk.
So
I have a full-time job to support my farming habit, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Your farming habit, right?
Yeah.
So where do you see the industry going maybe the next 5 to 10 years, and how can the federal or provincial governments really help out farmers today?
Yeah, well, I think that as we see the technologies change in marketing, I think marketing has been the big drive recently. So can you grow a new crop and then direct market it yourself and cut out the middleman? So whenever you have a really unique opportunity there to be a price setter instead of a price taker, that's going to be the difference. We hear a lot about, marketing tools like blockchain and things like that. I don't know if that's going to be fully developed in the next 5 years. 5 years goes by pretty quick, so I'm not going to expect a tremendous amount of change, but we always tend to underestimate the change in the short term too. So I think it's steady as we go. It's managing risk. It's dealing with the weather that we have.
How about taking off the carbon tax as well, off the natural gas for drying a lot of these grains, right?
Yeah, well, when you have we have a drought and then the rest of the province can't get their crops off. So it's totally different problems across the entire province. So that's when you talk about a government's role in trying to support that. It's pretty tough because we all have different problems. We don't need grain dryers because we barely had a crop to grow. But I think things like that definitely make a difference. If we can have exemptions on carbon tax, I can't see how that's not going to hurt. I know even on the irrigation front, it's amazing how much the carbon tax adds to something as simple as that. And the reality is that margins are tight in agriculture. So unless you're either really big farm or you've carved out a really nice niche, those little differences can make or break an organization.
Ken Coles from Farming Smarter, thanks a lot for joining me in studio today.
Thanks for having me, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.